No role plays, no conference calls, no BS. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader. This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, in this episode, I want to go over an article that I saw on Forbes Leadership, but it's talking about leadership trends that are driving success in 2024. I like them enough, and I think there's a lot in this article, more than can fit into an episode. There are 5 of these leadership trends, and I think we should go over them in a 5-part series over the next 5 Mondays. This article is written by Brent Gleason and Matthew Leinig. They work at a place called Talking Point Leadership, and I think some of these items, these leadership trends, they won't come as a surprise to a lot of people, but how important they are and the difference between leadership success and failure over this year and in the coming years, I think is going to be, I think it can't be overstated. And so I think it's really important. I think our listeners will get a lot out of it.
Yeah, I agree. I like these kind of series too, where we have more time to kind of break them down. But I also agree with you of kind of like there's certain elements of leadership, and yes, there are things that are evolving. There's expectations that are changing. There's elements of leadership that are becoming more important today than they were before. But I also think it's good to continue to talk about them because as people are just getting into leadership, or if you've been a leader for a long time and you're continuing to stay in the workforce and evolve your leadership, understanding some of these concepts is critical to being able to continue to have success.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. We will definitely post a link to the article in the podcast description. So if you want to read ahead, you're more than welcome to. But on the first of these 5 trends that Brent and Matthew talk about is adaptive leadership, which is basically the skill of leading in unpredictable and ever-changing environments. Every year, people say, change is the only constant. Oh, it's, things are constantly changing. At some point in time, we're going to just admit to ourselves that this isn't just a now thing. It's just always been this way. Things are changing. What might be new and different to some leaders is just the pace of that change. It might have been in the past that you could have taken 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years to adapt and to get into a new rhythm with regard to your leadership and your leadership abilities and your ability to lead certain teams. And nowadays, it's the kind of thing where you have to change and adapt in a matter of months or very, very short number of years, as opposed to kind of taking your time with it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's something that as we continue to have more technology and more capability of connecting with one another, connecting across the world, being able to move faster on ideas, being able to bubble things up that are things that you want to work on or work through. I think that speed and that capability of being able to find information and implement information and communicate with one another, I think this is really causing a place where things are moving a lot faster. And as a leader, that ability to understand that ability to appreciate that, and kind of always be in this state of knowing that that things are going to continually change. There will always be very clear foundational or pillars of not only leadership but of business. There are things that have kind of like been tried and tested over time. But when it comes to leading people, specifically empowering people, motivating people, inspiring people, understanding people, connecting with people, I think that there are, that definition of what does that look like within the workplace is continuing to evolve and change. And to be a leader this day and age, you really have to accept that. You have to be very comfortable in that space and be able to navigate it quickly. And that means a lot of times not knowing everything and not being the person who maybe was gatekeeping information of a decade, 2-3 decades ago. Now it really is about being in the flow of things, and sometimes not having all of the information or answers, but knowing how to adjust and to be able to adapt to what your team's needs are.
Right. I mean, it used to be possibly that if you were a leader of a team, even 20 years ago, the team that you were leading might be the same exact team of people for years, 3, 5, 7 or more years. And, I just saw an article recently that said don't hold it against an applicant if they've been with the same company more than 5 years. And I'm like, wait, what? Do you mean don't hold it against them if they've job hopped? No, don't hold it against them if they've been with the same company more than 5 years. And it basically is this assumption that people are going to change jobs very often because it's better for them long term. As companies have become less, I don't want to use the word loyal, but as they become, as the workforce has changed in a way that makes it clear that the person who should be looking out the best for your own career is you. And as you make decisions that, regarding what's best for your short and long-term situation, a lot of that will involve switching jobs, switching organizations, or even industries, primarily at the beginning part of your career. So if you are, between the ages of 18 and 35, it is likely you will switch jobs many times during that time frame. Because of that, if you're a leader of people, it's likely that the team that you're leading is going to change a lot over a very short period of time. It's not going to be the same exact team of people year in and year out like it may have been at the beginning of your career if you've been leading people for a while. So, again, changing might not necessarily mean, overhauling your entire leadership style. It could just be that, hey, you know what? 3 years ago, I had these 10 people, and now 3 years later, only 3 of those 10 people are still with me, and the other 7 are completely different because they've moved on to different organizations or because they had opportunities and we've hired people in, the company's grown, whatever it is. And those people want different leadership than the previous 7 people did. And so changing and adapting your leadership style might just be because the team you're leading is different. And so, the article is written from the perspective of 2 former Navy SEALs, and they talk about being able to navigate what, in their words, conditions that are volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And while those clearly apply to a lot of military, kind of that kind of environment, in a lot of businesses. You would think that maybe these are they don't apply there, but they do, especially in our post-COVID world. There are situations that are volatile. There are many situations that are uncertain, complex, and ambiguous for sure. And so the ability to kind of not try to fit the situation and your people into your leadership style, but rather adapt your leadership style to fit that situation, you're going to get a lot better results a lot more quickly if you can do that than if you're trying to kind of fit the round peg into the square hole.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you mentioned earlier, just like, as teams change over time, well, so do leaders as you take on promotions, as you change from different teams, as the organization asks you to do different types of work. And so, there's a very high likelihood that over the course of a couple of years, who you work with and how you're working with them could evolve quite a bit. And I think that, having that understanding, sticking to the core of who you are, like this is where I think the things around like authenticity, trustworthiness, integrity, these things matter a lot because as you're either seeing the change in your own career and responsibilities, or you're seeing your team change around how you meet people, how you talk to people, how you connect with people, how you follow up, how you develop, how you train, how you hold people accountable. All these things matter quite a bit. Also, different people need different things, and I think that's a big part of it now as well. Is there's a lot more awareness of the ways in which people want to be managed. There's a way people want to be held accountable, and I think from the long-standing, like, this is the process to do these things. This is how you communicate these things. This is how you have accountability in these things. Like all of this heavy process that's been around for decades and decades and decades. I think there's a lot of challenging happening within that process as the workforce is asking for something different, as the workforce is asking to be seen as more of an individual, as people are asking to be, whether it's, respected or understood based upon who they are and what they bring to work. That changes the process where you cannot just have this broad brush and very kind of rigid process to everything. You have to have a lot more flexibility in those things. And I think that is what leaders have to then role model. Like, again, if we're talking about being a successful leader in 2024, these things are mattering a lot more. I think you have to be conscious of that, and you have to be, rigid where you have to be. I was, talking to someone the other day, and it was like, no, you have to be rigid with certain things. Like you have to kind of draw out your sandbox, and these are the things that you can and will do, and these are the things that you really have to hold tight to. But when it comes to how work gets done, how people work together to get it done, there's a lot of flexibility in that space. And I think as a leader, to be successful, you have to make sure that space is created and it's protected.
I think you're spot on with that. The things that I like to think of as being rigid on are things that are values based. And when I think about my personal value system, I'm not saying that those things have never changed. Of course, they've changed over time. As you get new information and you start to think about the things that are important to you, you start to realize what you can and should compromise on versus what you should not compromise on. And if you start finding too many situations that don't work while holding rigid to whatever those values are, then something has to give. Either you have to discard that value as something that is just too rigid for the work environment that you're in, or you need to discard the work environment. If it's so important to you, if that value is so important to you that you can't see yourself compromising that, then you're in the wrong place. And so one of those two things has to change. But when it comes to your values, that's where I think the rigidity has to come in. Whatever those values are, if you find yourself compromising them, it's really difficult to enjoy what you do as not just an employee, but as a leader specifically, if you feel like you don't have this set of values you can embrace and kind of rely on. In the article, the authors talk about 3 things that are needed for an adaptive leadership style. They say embracing change, flexibility and agility, and learning orientation. And I like these because they kind of play into each other like this cycle that is constantly going. They're not done in order. They're done in order and they repeat themselves over and over and over again. And so, embracing change talks about, just knowing that change is inevitable and don't resist it, embrace it. Well, that's great, but that's a lot easier to do if you are flexible and agile, which is the next thing. If you can be flexible and agile, then it's a lot easier to embrace change. A person who is not flexible and not agile is going to have a harder time embracing change. And in order to be flexible and agile, you need to have a learning orientation. So if you, not just for yourself, but for your people, if you have it set up in a way where you are constantly learning and talking about your learnings, and you are encouraging your team to learn and get better at learning new things all the time, not just when it's required because the environment is changing and they have to adapt, but always and all the time. Constantly learning new things, putting an importance on whatever trainings are available, or even just learning how to do things that are above and beyond what the job description is. Anytime you can give your people new skills that apply not just in the job they were hired to do, but in life, they'll do more for you because they kind of view that relationship as having more reciprocity. They're getting more out of it than just a paycheck. And so if you can, kind of foster that learning orientation, then you will have the flexibility and agility needed to embrace changes when they happen. And it becomes this kind of self-feeding cycle. It's not something you can learn to do when all of a sudden change is happening. If it's being, kind of foisted upon you and now you have to adapt to it because you have no other choice, those are the types of changes that cause burnout. Those are the types of changes that cause people to kind of cut bait or leave an organization. It's not a healthy way of doing things. These are things you prepare for in advance by doing these things, and then when those changes come along, it's like you've gone to the gym several times and now you can lift the heavy thing, as opposed to learning how to lift it when it's time to move the couch.
I agree. Yeah, I think it's such an important thing, and I like the idea of it kind of being a cycle, because as we're, as leaders are continuing to want to be kind of adaptable and understand where we have to be, like there is that element of like, you've got to learn. You've got to be open-minded to it, and you got to be capable of being comfortable in the space of things changing around you constantly. And I think that's probably been one of the things that I've learned the most over my decades of leadership, is like being comfortable not being the one who has all of the answers, being comfortable like not having all of the quote-unquote process wisdom or those types of things, because as those things continue to get either more complex or, people spend more time in those systems and in those processes, as a leader of people, you really don't have the ability to do that.
Yeah, it's very freeing putting down that bag of bricks of having to be the one with all the answers. The moment you realize that not only do you not have them, so stop trying to fake it, but it's actually better and more engaging for your team if they have those answers. If you can get that done more quickly as a leader of people, you'll find that you can focus your efforts more on where they belong, not trying to kind of have this facade of being the person with all the answers.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 Minute Hack. But first, a few words from our sponsors.
All right, this episode's 1 Minute Hack is about the learning orientation spoken about in this article. Again, we'll put a link in the podcast description, but the authors put it as adaptive leaders foster a learning orientation within their teams and organizations. They encourage continuous learning and the development of new skills, recognizing that staying ahead in a rapidly changing business landscape requires ongoing education and adaptation. We'd like to expand that to say this isn't just about whatever your job is. This is about the mindset of learning things all the time, whether you're in work or outside of work. This could be a hobby. This could be a skill. This could be something that has literally nothing to do with what your current role as a leader or as an employee is. It's just the idea of making sure that your brain is capable and constantly learning something new. And I get it. There are some days where it's not going to happen. Some days you just do. But there needs to be more days where you are learning something than days where you're not. It has to weight more heavily towards learning something, even if it's something small, because learning how to learn is what you're trying to do here. You're putting your brain in a situation all the time where there's constantly more to learn, because it might seem obvious, but if you're doing this all the time, then you become inherently aware of the fact that there's always more to learn and that you don't know everything. And when you approach a situation as a leader, knowing that you don't know everything or that you may not have all the answers because you are constantly in this kind of learning orientation, you're much more likely to absorb what's going on before making a decision that might be poor. You're much more likely to engage with your team in getting the situation fixed or solved and getting the solutions from the right places. Having this kind of learning orientation will help you in more ways than just learning a hobby. This is about setting yourself up for the future success of being able to embrace the changes when they come.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.